Meeting to order. This is the Barville Planning Board meeting on the Invenergy Thermal Development LLC, Clear River Energy Center, Wallem Lake Road, Barville, map 120, lot 7, map 135, lot 2, map 137, lots 1, 2, 3, and 21, lot 153, lots 1 and 2. It's a pre-application concept plan review. For the record, the map 153 was done incorrectly. It was listed as 152, but it's 153. This evening also we have some questions that we posed to the applicant, and copies of that are up here at the podium if you'd like to grab them. And it's all about the comprehensive plan, which is what the planning board has been asked to review for compliance. So if you'd like to see those, they're up on the podium for your perusal. So this evening, what's going to happen is the applicant is here, Invenergy. They're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to lay out all the plans that they have so far for the plant and what it's going to look like, and what they have so far, or what they plan to do. The questions tonight will not be from the public, they'll only be from the planning board itself. So you will have an opportunity to ask your questions at the planning board meeting of June the 6th. That's when the public hearing is being held. And also, if you have any questions after this meeting that you don't feel have been, if you were here on Thursday night, there were a lot of things we asked the consultants. If you feel that you have some questions that haven't been answered yet, if you could send those to the town planner, and he will get that, have those questions answered, or if we haven't the materials already, he'll get back to you. Okay, it's tkravitz@barville.org, or you can go through the website and look up Tom and contact information there. Okay, so without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Noonan. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Adler, Pollock, and Sheehan in Providence, and along with my partner, Alan Shore, at the end here, we represent Invenergy. We're here tonight on the pre-application concept plan for your review. I have with me John Nyland from Invenergy. He will be giving a presentation and overview of the project, recognizing that this is the first time that it has been presented to this body. Also I have with me is Mike Feinblatt from ESS, who are the engineers, civil engineers on the project, environmental engineers, I'm sorry. And in the audience I have our surveyor, Richard Lipsitz. I'm really just going to sort of review the plans generally. If you have any specific questions for them, we can handle them. We are in receipt of the questions that were prepared in regards to what we need to show in terms of consistency with the comp plan, along with addressing certain issues of noise and air. We have experts in those fields to answer those questions, and those experts will be presented on June 6th. We have them in line, materials we submitted for that hearing, at which time we should be able to, address most of those. We would obviously welcome all of your thoughts this evening on areas that we should go into to give a full presentation for your review at that time.
So for clarity, the open items at the moment are air quality and water quality?
Water, yeah.
Okay, so water and air. Okay.
So
those are two main open items. Okay.
Understood, and as I said, we'll have that information and we'll go into depth with that at the June 6th presentation. We're aware that your experts have asked for some additional information, your consultants of our experts, and we're working to get that information to them so that this board will have as complete a record of information as they need to review this matter.
Great, thank you. Yes. Well, noise is a subject, yes, but it's not an open item as far as needing further study, I don't believe. So noise is an issue, but I think we've I think you've gotten that information, what we're looking for, and I think you may have contained that in part of your presentation this evening. I could be mistaken on that.
We weren't going to go into depth on the noise issue. The information in the report was presented as part of it. It will be reviewed, but again, I think we have presented the studies. There may be some further refining of that in light of requests that have been made by your consultants in terms of making sure we hit that 43 dB per your ordinance.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like is to have John Nyland open this presentation and give an overview of Invenergy and the Clear River Energy Center.
Thanks, Beth. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate the ability to be here in front of you tonight to provide an overview of the project and a brief overview of Invenergy. Oops. Invenergy is an independent power producer. We were formed in 2001. We build, we own, we operate. Our focus is actually primarily renewable energy, and that was sort of the foundation of the formation of the company. To date, we've developed approximately 12,000 megawatts of projects throughout the U.S., Canada, and Europe, and South America, and some projects in Japan. We are the fourth largest independent wind power producer in the United States. And we also have a number of energy storage projects, and we are actually the largest operator of energy storage projects to date. You can get a sense of the scale of projects that we have here in the U.S. and in Canada. These are all wind, thermal, solar, and energy storage, and thermal. The Clear River Energy Center was a project that we put together really in response to signals that we got from the New England ISO, who is the manager of the New England grid. The signals that they send out really come in the form of the results of annual capacity auctions that they conduct every year. They conduct these auctions on a 3-year forward basis so that they can maintain reliable electric supply. And that's really the main reason that, we looked at the Rhode Island, Southeastern Mass region for locating this plant, because in the past several auctions that were conducted, this region had insufficient capacity, and as a result, the price that was the ISO was offering for projects to be located here was at the cap that the ISO set. So the project that we're proposing is a combined cycle project, which is it'll be the most efficient power plant in New England. We've selected GE for the technology, and this technology is what they term their H-class technology. It's just to give you an idea, the combustion turbine technology, you may be familiar with the Ocean State Power Plant, where they have 4 combustion turbines and 2 steam turbines. That plant was built back in 1987 is when it came online. And, the manufacturers give these machines letter designations. So the Ocean State Power Plant was called a 7EA. So they've gone E, F, G, H, and in doing so, the combustion turbines have become far more efficient and produce far more power. So with a single combustion turbine and steam turbine combination, the Clear River project with just one of those units can produce roughly 500 megawatts, where back in 1987 you needed to have 4 machines to produce roughly the same amount of power. It also does that by being about 30% more efficient. So you can produce more power with less gas, and it also does it far more cleanly. In other words, the emissions are less on a pound per megawatt hour basis. We bid the project into the ISO, the New England ISO's last forward capacity auction that they conducted in February. That would be for an online date of June 1, 2019. And we had configured the project so that it had multiple, or 2 trains, 2 gas turbines, 2 steam turbines, each on a single shaft. And the reason we did that was because we weren't sure, we knew that there was a need for power. We weren't sure how much the ISO, would select in this past auction. And so we broke up the plant into these 2 blocks, much the same way that Ocean State Power did back in the day, where they kind of did it in 2 separate blocks. Just because it was not certain to us as to how much the ISO would accept. So the plan would be to, as I said, at least have the first train online in June 1, 2019. Our plan would be to bid the second train in the next auction that'll be held next February. And if it's accepted, it would have an online date of June 1, 2020. We propose to get water supply from the Pasco Utility District, and we have a slide later on that. And the discharge of water from the plant would be to the Bowerville wastewater treatment plant. The project is going to use air-cooled condensers, and what that means is, unlike Ocean State Power, where they have a wet tower and they use a lot of water and you see a steam plume, you don't have that here. You basically have a large radiator. It uses the air, to cool the plant. As a result, the water consumption that the plant needs is about 90% less than it would need if it were to use water like Ocean State Power. The project will also have dual fuel capability, meaning that we will have oil as a backup fuel. And the main purpose for that is, the ISO has a reliability program. They want to make sure that the electric supply is reliable. And if you get into some really cold winter days and gas becomes unavailable because it's all being used for heating homes and businesses in the region, and the power plant usually they have to come behind that or after that use, and so you can get curtailed. So you have dual fuel capability, so you can keep the lights on, if that event were to occur.
One question. You were saying that the ISO, you're going to bid in the second turbine, basically?
Yeah.
And what happens if they don't accept it?
If they don't accept it, our plan is to permit, for the whole unit. But if they don't accept it, we wouldn't build it. We may try to do it a subsequent year later, but
so you try to bid it in a subsequent year.
Yeah, yeah. But the way we're trying to configure it right now is, our expectation is that they will accept it, just because looking at the landscape in terms of the need that's out there, because there's a tremendous amount of older facilities in New England that are on the cusp of retirement, and some of those, we anticipate there may even be announcements this year of additional retirements, and when that happens, I think the ISO is going to be looking for power. So
thank you.
Here you can see a rendering of the facility. What you see here, this is the air-cooled condenser. It's a large radiator. These pipes that are up on top are the steam pipes that come out of the steam turbine, rather. Inside this building is the gas turbine and a steam turbine on a common shaft. In between the gas and the steam turbine, there's a generator. So there is one generator per train. This is the boiler, or the heat recovery steam generator. And what happens here is that the gas turbine, its exhaust comes out of the turbine at about 1200 degrees, and we pass it through a series of radiators or boilers in order to capture that heat to generate steam, such that when the exhaust comes out the stack, it's at around 150 to 180 degrees. So you've dropped the temperature by close to 1,000 degrees. This is the operation and control building. This would be water treatment. And this is an electrical building. This is a gas meter station here. We will have a small gas compressor located in that building just because connecting to the pipeline, there are periods of time when the gas pressure drops below the pressure that the plant needs. Most of the time, it's actually much higher, and we would have to, throttle it down a little bit. But there are periods of time during the winter when gas pressure could drop, and you may need to, bump up the pressure a bit. There's an overview of the site location. In here, you can see, the proximity to the compressor station. This is the Algonquin pipeline. That pipeline actually consists of two pipes. There's a 30-inch and a 24-inch. It starts down in New Jersey and goes all the way up into Boston. And then here is the National Grid right-of-way where they have two 345 kV electric transmission lines. The benefits that we see, of the project are helping to address the energy needs, as I spoke about earlier. We see that it has the potential to generate a lot of revenue for the town in terms of taxes and other, goods and services that the project would buy throughout its life. There will be permanent jobs, about 25 to 27 people, permanent jobs on site. Those are, fairly highly skilled jobs, well-paying. There will certainly be construction jobs during, constructing the project. Our proposal to use the water from the Pasco utility districts involved the project actually paying Pasco, if you will, to install a treatment system, because that aquifer, that well 3A, as you all know, I'm sure was contaminated back in 2000, 2001. And, at the time, Rydam, was attempting to put in a treatment system. It's really the same treatment system that we're proposing to put in, except, we'll put it in a scale that, it'll be more effective. That treatment system has been used, in various locations throughout the U.S. There's one location, Santa Monica, California, actually. Their water table was similarly contaminated with gasoline and MTBE, and they use a carbon filter system like this, except the scale of that facility is about 4 million gallons a day, serving the Santa Monica, which is a population of 60,000 people, and they produce drinking quality water using the exact same technology. So it's it's been around a number of years. It's proven technology, and we have a lot of faith that it's going to be able to do exactly what we say it will do. Helping us. Oops, let me go back. Save money on electric bills. One of the things that we included in our Energy Facility Siting Board application was the fact that there are ratepayer savings that will come about as a result of having a project like this. And really how that happens is because the project is so efficient, it's able to produce power more cheaply. And that's because we're not burning as much gas in order to produce a megawatt. It's burning less gas. So that, gets directly reflected in the price for power that, the project does produce. And it's a quantifiable number. And right now the Department of Public Utilities is, we've given them the detailed calculations and the bases for that. And they're going through that analysis to see if they come to a similar conclusion. One other thing that a project like this helps to do for the region is help to incorporate more renewables. And it's really one of the reasons why Invenergy gets involved in gas-fired projects. As I said, our primary focus is renewables, but you need to really have a mix. You have to have, you can have wind and solar, but you have to have something there to back it up when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And how this project is able to do that is that it has a rapid start capability, has a high ramp rate capability, and the ISO needs more of those capabilities in order to bring in more renewables, because renewables are highly variable. They're, I wouldn't say unpredictable. They can predict, how the wind's going to be and the weather's going to be and all that, but they do, vary quite a bit, and you can see sizable swings. And when that happens, you need to have something there who can jump in and fill in that gap. So it's one thing that I think the ISO has recognized, and certainly as you incorporate more and more renewables in there, into the power mix, then having that capability is going to be of prime importance. The last issue here on the air emissions, as I said, because the project is so efficient that, plugging it in now, there's power is being met by, other generation right now, right? And so, that generation, if it doesn't retire, if you bring this project in, and you're going to sort of push it aside. So you're going to displace that older, more polluting emission, that generator. And as a result, even with the emissions that you have from this project, overall emissions will go down because you've displaced something that is, that much more polluting. And I have another slide on this later on we can talk about. So the New England energy needs. This is a graphic from the ISO's 2016 Regional Electricity Outlook. And they've indicated, plants that have already announced closure or will be closed by 2019. And then these other plants here are other older thermal facilities that, just due to their age and their technology, they are at risk, that the ISO terms, they're at risk for retirement. So to date, about 4,200 megawatts have either already retired or will before 2019, and the red dots represent an additional 6,000 megawatts. So that's about 10,000 megawatts. And to put that into perspective, the whole New England ISO is about a 30,000 megawatt grid. It's actually 28,000 megawatts peak load. We have about 35,000 megawatts of generation. That margin, 28 minus 35, is the reserve margin that you need to have so that, if a unit does trip, you have something else that can come on. So suffice to say that 10,000 megawatts represents a sizable chunk of the generating capacity in New England. That's why the ISO is concerned about it. So we talked already about the job creation, taxes, what have you. It's certainly sizable numbers. The water supply, the well 3A, as I said earlier, was contaminated back in 2001. It was shut down by a court order, a consent order by the Department of Health. That consent order said that the well could never be used for drinking water, but could only be used for remediation. So we approached the Pasco Utility District and said, we don't want to use it for drinking water, but we will pay for the installation of a treatment system that will remediate it, and then we'll use the water in our process. We won't use it for drinking, in accordance with the consent order, but we will clean that water up to a drinking water quality standard. So just to make sure that no contamination would leave that site, and it would be controlled there right at the well head. So we will invest in the treatment system. We would pay for the installation of a dedicated pipe, and those systems would be turned over to Pasco to operate, and we would pay them, to operate those systems, until such time that either the water gets completely remediated, it could be deemed drinking water, or for the life of the project. We've done evaluations on the volume of water that we would use on an annual basis, and compared that to other water users that you have, not only at Pasco but Harrisville, and looked at the projections that both of those utilities have in terms of the water being used out in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and based on that, there is adequate volume, adequate capacity in the aquifer in order to meet not only all the drinking water needs, but also the needs of the project. This is just a graphic showing, the rough location of where the well is and where we would propose to route the pipeline. down Route 100, Wallen Lake Road. This gets into the ratepayer savings a little bit. This is the what I was mentioning earlier in terms of, you know, what our calculations show what those ratepayer savings would be, and just to give you an idea, the $280 million, that's energy and capacity savings that just for Rhode Island ratepayers, and from the year 2019 to 2022. We didn't carry it out beyond that just because, you know, after 2022, you know, it's hard to predict what other new plants may be online, or, you know, how many renewables you get. So, you know, your numbers get a little, you know, squishy beyond that. But, you know, we have a high degree of confidence in, you know, numbers at least between 2019 and 22. You know, supporting renewables. You know, the project does have the, you know, the high flexibility, rapid response, and, you know, the emissions estimates that, you know, we calculated in terms of, you know, the various criteria pollutants that we have to address in our air permit application. You know, this reduction of these pollutants includes the emissions that we have, and so you get that sort of annual reduction year over year. How that translates in terms of air quality and, you know, various emissions. This is a chart that was produced by the U.S. Department of Energy Information Administration, and it's really just for New England. But one thing you see here is using CO2 as a benchmark. You can see from 1990 to today, you've had a 40% decrease just in the power generation sector. That's due primarily for two reasons. One is sort of the conversion away from oil and coal to natural gas, but also the use of the combined cycle technology, you know, which really didn't start being used until the late 80s, early 90s, and the fact that, you know, there have been combined cycle plants brought on, and then, you know, as time has gone on, they've become much more efficient. So, you know, this trend we expect to continue. So I said earlier, the interconnections that we have, water will be from the Pasco Utility District via dedicated line. Wastewater would be discharged to the Burrowville Sewer Treatment. Electricity would be connecting into running a new 6-mile line down to the Sherman Road substation, and that would be built by National Grid. And then natural gas will be delivered from the adjacent Algonquin pipeline. We had provided Burrowville Sewer Wastewater Treatment Plant, the Sewer Commission, an estimate of our wastewater discharge quantity and quality. They had performed an evaluation, a facilities plan evaluation of the capability of that plant to accept the water, and determined that they have adequate volume, they can accept the water. The proposed chemistry that we think we'll have, you know, was in line with their discharge permit. Anything that we send to them, they have to be able to treat it, and they still have to maintain, you know, the limits that they are subject to discharge. And one of the things that they liked about the idea is the point of interconnection, which will be right on Wallen Lake Road. It's kind of at a dead end of their, you know, at the outer edge of their system. And they like the idea of having that water flow through there and kind of, you know, flushes it out. So I think they're also, they like the idea that, you know, we would be a major customer on their system, so that's added revenue for them as well. The facility plan that we would have to go through would have to be approved by RIDA. So they would put together what do they call it, Mike? Order of approval, yeah. They would have to put together an order of approval or seek an order of approval from RIDA. And so RIDA would be the ultimate decision maker in that process. The electric transmission line, would go from the Spectra property here. This whole section of line here, this is all within Spectra's property. And then a new line would run down within the existing right-of-way that National Grid currently owns. There would be a new breaker installed at the Sherman Road substation. They had just rebuilt that substation. There was an old substation right next to it. They've cleared and leveled it, so there's ample space to put in a new breaker and tie the project in. The gas pipeline, as I said, it's pretty short. It's probably only about 500 feet connecting into the Spectra Algonquin pipeline, and so no new rights-of-way are required for the gas. For noise, as you mentioned earlier, you've seen the noise studies that we have conducted. We're proposing to meet the 43 decibels at the nearby residence during normal operations, and that includes startup and shutdown. And I think we're all aware that 43 decibels is actually a fairly low number. It's really it requires quite a bit of attenuation, and I can get more into that if you have some questions on that. But it's certainly not something that's not impossible. Just have to be careful in terms of your the selection of the design, the various components that you use, and where you locate them, and it can be done. The permitting process that the project has to go through is fairly extensive. Certainly the Energy Facility Siting Board application and process is one, but they are also going to be seeking opinions, not only from the town but also from RIDEM, and there are a variety of permits that the project has to obtain, for air, for stormwater, wetland impact, the water permitting, getting RIDEM involved in reviewing the use of the well and the installation of the treatment system. That will all be governed by RIDEM, and certainly the installation of any pipelines in the road would be subject to RIDOT approval. The major air source permitting is certainly it's covered by RIDEM, but their authority is really from the United States, the EPA, and we have to demonstrate that we're compliant with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards and all of RIDEM's acceptable ambient levels that they like to see. So that's certainly something that we have to comply with. It's hard to get a sense of how the standards line up and how the project compares. So I have a couple of graphs here that show you, the ambient air quality standard. So the green bar here is the National Ambient Air Quality Standard determined by EPA. The red bar is what is actually currently in the background in the air, and then the blue is what the project would be admitted. So this is for CO. This is for PM 2.5. NOx, nitrogen oxides. So, just, I think you can get a sense of this, that, it's natural gas, it's very clean burning. The project will have an SCR, a selective catalytic reduction, and Mike can speak more about that, and a CO catalyst, so it's got, advanced pollution control equipment on it. Really, the best available control technology has to be used in order to achieve the lowest achievable limit that you can get. And that's using natural gas. Wetlands and stormwater permitting will be a combined wetlands and stormwater permit application that will be submitted to RIDEM. There will also be an individual permit that will be including the same information that will be provided to the Army Corps of Engineers. The application will have to detail all the wetland mitigation will be implemented, and we're working on that permit application and hope to have it here in the near future. Go into a little detail about the project. This provides an overview of really the Spectra site. You can see here's the compressor station, here is the pipeline, here is the National Grid right-of-way. So their property is roughly 730 acres, and the project would sit roughly here and would connect in over at the right-of-way and right along the path roughly here. What we're proposing to do is redraw the lot lines here to combine some of these the former lots to produce some fewer lots here, and then have the project site sit on 67 acres right at that location. This is a plot plan showing, you can see this is the boiler, it's the combustion turbine here, steam turbine is kind of hard to see, certainly. This is the air-cooled condenser, there's the oil tanks, control building, and water storage tanks. And there you can see, the limits of the parcel, access road, and the adjacent compressor station. Topographically, you can see not only the gradient lines, but also the shaded areas. These are the wetlands. The wetlands have been delineated and accepted by RIDEM, so they've confirmed the wetland location. The access road is generally following an existing dirt road that's there now, and there is one stream crossing right here. Yeah, right here. Okay.
I didn't know if you had any questions for John. If not, what I'd probably like to do, first of all, do you want to ask some questions?
Yeah, I think we'll go down the line if we could, and if they have any questions on that, then we can go from there.
You stated earlier that you would be able to maintain the 4 to 3 decibel dBA during startup and shutdown times also?
Yes.
Okay, because we had some conflicting information on that last week.
Yeah, so when we, we went through the evaluation, we looked at, what it comes down to is there's these valves that are called the bypass valves, and when you start the unit up, steam has to bypass the steam turbine. It gets dumped into the air-cooled condenser. And so we had valve manufacturer information on how much noise those valves produce. And, when we first plugged that into the model, it looked like we could probably get down to 46 dBA in startup and shutdown. And so, we took a closer look at those valves, and we actually went out and found another valve manufacturer who's known to be able to produce valves that are quieter. And then we took, there was 2 valves located indoors, and one of the valves was up, sitting up on top of the boiler. We relocated that valve inside the building, and when we did that, we were able to achieve the 43 dBA.
Thank you. Just one more question. In light of the accident that just happened down in Pennsylvania with the explosion on the gas line, do you see that projecting any issues with not being able to run with the gas? What kind of an instance would that happen? Would you have to go to oil-fired for a long period of time if something like that were to happen in this area?
I would say, well, the air permit application that we have, we filed for the ability to burn oil per machine about 30 days per year. You know, if you just look at, you know, how often we think we would do that just due to the unavailability of gas as a result of cold weather, it would probably be something that would be maybe, you know, 5-10 days per year. In fact, this past winter, we wouldn't have run on oil at all because it was fairly mild. In the polar vortex in 2014, probably would have run about 5 to 10 days per year. In the previous 4 or 5 years, it was also very mild. We wouldn't have run on oil. You do have to periodically test the unit on oil just to make sure that everything still works, so that if you have to. But you know, if something like that, as you suggest, were to happen, we would be limited by the permit. You know, you couldn't do it more than 30 days. So I would expect, you know, if something like that would probably be able to resolve itself, you know, in less than 30 days.
This question just imposed by the chairman. Do you have to actually shut the system down when you convert from oil to gas?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. You have to turn the unit down, and then you can bring it up on oil. But I think when you're going from oil back to gas, I think then you have to shut it down. But I'd have to confirm that with GE.
And one other question I had, we haven't heard anything about, but can you give an estimate as the amount of gallonage of oil that would be used, say, per hour when the turbines are running at full tilt?
It would be we have 2 million gallons, which is enough to run the unit for about 3.5 days, and beyond that, you would need 3.5 to 4 tanker trucks per hour to continue to run on oil.
Thank you.
I have no questions at this time.
Same with me. You got your own? You got your own?
Hi. Hello. Hey, it works. A couple of questions. Start on the gas line coming in from the compressor facility. The condensate that's going to be inherent in the gas. I didn't see anything on the plans showing any kind of like a knockout system online or a condensate storage on the plans themselves. Is your plan to send the condensate back to the gas company so it can be handled in one location rather than have to take care of it at your facility?
What you do in the gas yard, it doesn't really. It's kind of hard to see at the scale, but there will be, you know, condensate tanks. So you come in and you have what's called a separator, and it'll knock out the liquids that get stored in there, and that liquid is actually then handled by a licensed contractor and hauled off site. We don't give it back to them.
So you're not going to take care of that. You've already answered the question I had about the gas line problem down in Pennsylvania. Looking at the building construction itself, the plant I worked in on the Johnston landfill, it was a single skin building with insulation hung on the sides to not only dampen the noise, but to keep the heat in during the wintertime. Big issue up here. The biggest problem we had with that was time, gravity, vibration, caused all the insulation inside the plastic bags, if you will, to settle out, and created virtually a dead spot in the insulation, so any noise from inside the building was going straight out. The building that you're planning on constructing here, is that going to be a double wall with the insulation trapped between, or just a single wall?
No, it's actually, you know, I would characterize it as sort of, you know, a high performance, you know, sound attenuating wall that has insulating properties. It's a fabricated wall. It comes in, you know, panels that are all prefabricated that you then hang on, but they are, you know, they're pretty robust.
So we're looking at something that's about 8 or 9 inches thick.
Yeah, I don't know how thick. I mean, I can get back to you on how thick they are, but they're, it's an engineered wall. It comes in, multiple layers, and it has you buy it from the manufacturer who provides you with a guarantee in terms of, what sound attenuation you're going to be able to get from or expect from that wall.
One of the things we've heard mentioned before has been about building around the noise, behind noise equipment, insulating that, soundproofing that. Has any thought been used to just berming up dirt around this facility instead of building like a building itself, build a wall and then pile up the dirt alongside it? The insulating factor is about 20 times more than anything else.
Yeah, you mean, I think you're talking about something like a highway wall, you see.
On that idea, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that, from what I've seen from the reports, the effectiveness of, the highway wall type of thing is, you're better off with going with, high performance walls on the building itself, and, if you have to put some, what they call it, sound attenuating lagging, on like the steam duct to the air cool condenser, things like that. That's more effective than the wall because, the sound, can, radiate over the wall, right? Whereas if you can control it in a, sort of a confined space, then that's better.
Okay, thank you. The air quality calculations that we've seen on the charts, I understand that Invenergy, try this again, Invenergy had to purchase or did purchase some credits for air quality. So my question is, the numbers that we're seeing on the charts, is that before or after the credits have been applied?
Oh, the credit only allows you to get, in order to, and Mike can, speak to this probably better than I, but the emission credits, that's a federal law, if you will, that, if you want to emit something, you have to go buy, credits from, some other facility that has those credits available. It's the government's way of sort of, driving down the emissions that, you just can't go out and emit. Something else has to have a credit available, and that credit was only created by something that was emitting something at some point in time and is no longer emitting. So you go out and you buy these credits, and that's causing whoever you bought them from, that they're no longer emitting, but you just have to have that prior to you getting your permit.
Okay, so those credits were actually from something in this location, southern New England area?
Those credits,
it's not from something out on the West Coast.
No. It's got to be in the same air region. It can't be from like Illinois or California or anything like that, right?
Okay.
The EPA, you say, I want to get the credit from, X, and, the EPA and RIDEM both review it and say, okay, that's good.
The oil storage, the diesel storage, the dike around there, I believe the capacity on that is only 1 million gallons.
Yeah, 2 1 million gallon tanks.
Right, but the dike itself is only capable of retaining 1 million?
Yeah, the way the code works associated with the tank, it's a double wall tank. You postulate the failure of one tank at a time, and then the dike is designed to contain that. That's the way they had the code set up.
If I was going to carry the bill for having to do a cleanup, I think I want to be really careful and make sure that everything's covered. A cleanup of that magnitude right next to a wetlands would be phenomenal. I think I want to see that berm capable of covering both tanks, just to be on the safe side.
Okay.
I keep on hearing this mentioned too. What is energy storage? When you describe the company,
It's basically
a big battery, a capacitor?
yes, lithium-ion batteries, banks and banks of them. It's new. It's very expensive. In New England, really only use it for regulation. In other words, they're monitoring a signal from the ISO, and they're controlling the voltage almost on a second to millisecond basis. It's not really providing, bulk power, but it can do it, for, I'm actually looking at a project in Massachusetts where we have a 20 megawatt battery storage facility. It would fill this auditorium with batteries, and it's only, providing that regulation service.
Is this what they're doing to recycle the Prius batteries? I understand that they can't get rid of them at all.
This is something like, you see Tesla, for example, right? They're building a gigafactory, and, one of the technologies that they're promoting is that, having battery storage and working in concert with, renewable projects like wind and solar, can help, reinforce the grid. So, but yeah, it's certainly not without its own challenges.
Last one, this is a pet peeve of mine. We're taking water away from the aquifer. It has to mitigate down and actually replenish the aquifer somehow. One of the things in Burrillville is that this town started off as a textile manufacturing town. Every factory in this town was powered by a water wheel, and the dams were supporting the water wheel production. I look at the prospectus from your company and I see a lot about renewable energy, but I don't see anything in there at all about hydro. Solar, half the time it's not working. Wind is too much of a variable to even depend on. But here in the New England area, we have streams and dams and everything that are running 24/7, at least 350 days out of the year. But I don't see any action towards utilizing that again. And if we could see something like that in this town, it would help to preserve the rural character of the town and our mill ponds for fishing, even just the community, to see an actual active water wheel again. And I'm just kind of curious if there's been any exploration into doing something along that lines.
By
From
Invenergy?
From the company itself.
Yeah, hydro is kind of unique. We don't have any hydrogeologists or folks that focus on that. There certainly are a number of companies out there that do. One that comes to mind is Brookfield, and they have a number of dams, around the Northeast and in Canada. I personally don't have any experience, or I have very limited experience with hydro. But the permitting process is one that you have to go through a federal agency. It's time consuming.
To buy the water rights alone, I understand. To buy the water rights alone, I understand. It can be really interesting. And some of the things that they look at, like if you were to talk about like the dam that you have in the center of town, and putting a water wheel there, you could get some power out of that, but I think probably the downside would be that the dam may go dry for longer periods of time, especially during the summer, because now you're taking that water and using it to create power. So on the one side it kind of looks great that you can get the power that way, but on the other side the fishermen may not like it. So but that's just something that our company doesn't we don't focus on that. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. You had mentioned the construction was somewhat in stages, did you not? You were talking about something that it would be completed June 1, 2019, and then the second stage essentially would be completed
A year later.
a year later.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if you don't get that second stage, does the efficiency of the plant get diminished?
No, it's two separate units,
Okay.
both similarly efficient.
Okay, great. The other question that I had was about the bypass valve. Are these valves on every unit, and do they were you talking about 43 decibels for each valve?
No,
Or
no.
is that
40
total?
Yeah, that's, when you're in startup, there's 3 valves per unit, and, all 3 valves would be operating. There's a, well, suffice to say that there's 3 valves, so it was really just sort of, where do you put the valve and locating the valve. And, what's interesting is, there's 3 or 4 manufacturers who can tell you that they'll make these valves. They're rather unique valves. And if you looked at a normal valve, and then you looked at a bypass valve, you probably wouldn't even recognize it as being a valve. It's kind of like a contraption. And so, in my experience, there was, companies like Fisher Valve, you may have heard of them, Mason Nealon, but the company we're going to go with is a company called CCI. GE is actually providing a valve within their scope. And they, in my experience, they're probably the best manufacturer of that valve.
So there's dampening qualities in these?
Oh, they're the best. Yeah, I mean, they are a lot more expensive.
One of the things we were shown, last week was obviously these valves and at startup and at shutdown, that they could get up to 80 or 100 decibels for anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours at a time. That, to me, is fairly significant. One of the things they were also talking about was enclosing these valves. You've mentioned a lot of noise dampening practices you're looking to employ. Is that something that you would look to employ with these valves as well?
Yeah, the noise is a function of not only the design of the valve, and that varies by manufacturer, but also, where you locate the valve. So, if you just put the valve outside and you don't really, put like a muffler on the back end of it, they can be very loud. So if you don't take the care and do the design in order to be able to control that, yeah, you're going to get a very loud start.
So these 9 valves are all going to be inside? They're all going to be enclosed?
The bypass valves, yeah, they will all be enclosed, yeah.
I just had one other question, and maybe the environmental engineer would be able to address this. I'm just interested in some of the contaminants, other than maybe the ones that you've mentioned here in the presentation, that are going to be released into the air, and what the flow capacity of that is in terms of range, or either close or far, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think Mike would be better.
Yeah, so RIDEM has a regulation, an air toxics regulation, where it requires you to quantify the air toxics that you're going to emit from whatever source you're trying to permit, and then do a modeling exercise to demonstrate that the concentrations of those air toxics beyond the property line would be below what they call the acceptable ambient levels. So, unfortunately for a source like ours, there's not a lot of recent information on the air toxics emission rates from firing natural gas and oil. So you have to rely on what's out there, which in a lot of cases are sort of older emission factors from 20, 30 years ago that are very conservative. But regardless, so you take these conservative emission factors and you estimate, what your emission rates will be for these various air toxics. And what the model does is it models how those air toxics will disperse from the stacks, the various stacks along the site, in the surrounding area. And you run it for every potential meteorological condition that's occurred over the last 5 years. And it essentially tells you at every location, in the 10 miles around the plant that you're looking at, what those combined concentrations will be. And, as long as those concentrations are below these acceptable ambient levels, which are presumably the levels that RIDEM has determined through health studies are safe for the public and the environment, then you can get your permit. So, there's lots of conservatism in the analysis, but in doing that analysis, you can be sure that those concentrations, and you can really pinpoint it to any location during any type of operating condition, any meteorological condition, wind direction, wind speed, temperature. You really look at every, eventuality. And in the end, as long as the highest impact that you predict is below those acceptable ambient levels, you're able to get your permit, because you've demonstrated that your levels will be safe.
Great, thank you. Is there any odor that is associated with this?
No.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My question may also be for you. It's a more environmental permitting process question. It's nothing specific to exactly the plans that you put up, but in your package to the siting board, there's an environmental assessment included in there, which is really just a phase one kind of assessment of the alternatives to this project. You know, the no action, alternative energy, and putting this plant right here. And what I'm wondering is a project of this magnitude, does it not rise to the level of an environmental impact statement that the EPA would require? I haven't seen any reference to one being developed at any level of government oversight here. Is that on the table?
Well, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, which is what governs the preparation of the EIS, is basically designed for a federal action. When there's going to be a federal action that the federal government has to take action on, the federal government has to decide whether that action will require the preparation of an EIS. So the responsibility for that comes from that government agency which is tasked with carrying forth that federal action. So the reason why this project could be subject to NEPA is that we need to get an individual permit from the Army Corps of Engineers for wetlands. So when we submit the Army Corps, our wetlands application to the Army Corps of Engineers, they'll internally do an environmental assessment and determine whether an EIS is necessary. It's their responsibility to make that determination, not ours. Now, it's important to note that typically an EIS is required in a case where it's a project that requires federal approval but doesn't necessarily require lots of environmental approvals. So if somebody's trying to build a new highway, they don't necessarily need lots of environmental permits, yet there could be lots of environmental impacts. So the idea of the NEPA process for a project like that is it fills in the gaps where they don't necessarily need an air permit, so somebody should be looking at whether air quality is an issue for a transportation project. So that's where the EIS comes in. With a project like this, where we not only have the siting board application, which addressed the entire suite of environmental impacts, when you look at the list of permits that we need to get, really all of the environmental impacts from this project will be fully vetted by RIDE and other agencies. So it's our belief that in the end, what the Army Corps of Engineers will conclude is that there's no gap here in the environmental assessment of this project, so there's no need for an EIS. But again, that's their responsibility to come to that conclusion.
Okay, that makes sense. That's a good explanation. And I guess what I'm getting at is that whole alternatives process is, at what point do we learn what alternatives you've looked into for siting this power plant? And that's where I'm going with this, is why are we the ones on the planet that you're plunking this power plant into? And I know that's not addressing the specific proposal here tonight. It's a larger picture issue, and maybe it's not even appropriate for our discussion tonight. But
Everything's
I'm bringing it
appropriate.
up. I'm asking the question.
Yeah. So, that's also a question, that the Public Utility Commission asked, is, the alternatives analysis. So, when we look at, trying to meet the need, for having new generation and where you can put it, what you're seeing today is, you really need to find locations that are close to the gas pipeline, close to the electric transmission line, have availability to water, and have the proper zoning and things of that nature. So, when you sort of, look at those various attributes that a site has to have, there aren't a lot. on top of that is the, trying to be within a region within New England where there is a need. And what I mean by the region is that the New England ISO breaks up all of New England into these various zones based on the electric transmission. And the Rhode Island Southeastern Mass zone is one of that's the zone that had, the need. It cleared at the cap in the past couple of auctions, so it had high pricing. But it's also what they call an import constrained zone, meaning you can't put a project, in Connecticut and try to import the power into this zone. Even though there's, a couple of high voltage transmission lines, the way that those lines work is you couldn't get the power in. You had to have the power in the zone. That's really why the ISO selected, this project, because it was in the right zone. So when you look at the zone and you say, I need to be here, here's the pipeline, here's the electric transmission line, it really just comes down to, maybe a handful of sites, if that have all those attributes. And then what we do is we go in and we look at the electric transmission system capability, how much available transmission capacity is there. We look at the pipelines, how much available capacity is on for the gas pipeline, and then certainly the zoning and what have you. And you see, all of these potential sites, a lot of them just fall away right away. Either the electric transmission isn't there or the natural gas isn't there. If you're somewhere like, over in, Pawtucket or someplace like that, there's a gas pipeline there, but it doesn't have the capacity to, provide a project like this. So, that's really why you see a lot of projects are being proposed right on this Algonquin pipeline. There was a project in Uxbridge that, I think was proposed recently, and there was a review done, I think, by the folks in Uxbridge, and maybe they had turned it down. There's a similar project being proposed in Killingly, again, right on the pipeline. And the reason you're seeing these projects, right on the pipeline, like the CPV Tewantic project, is because, that's where the gas is. You can't take it and put it on a spur somewhere, just because, because you can't get the gas capacity there. One of the other projects that was awarded capacity in this past auction was the PSE&G Bridgeport project. There they have an old coal plant. They're going to shut down and replace it with a gas-fired combined cycle project. But there's actually another main pipeline that goes right through their site. It's called the Iroquois pipeline. It comes from Canada and it goes all the way to Long Island. And it just happens to be sitting right there. So you really need to be on those main pipelines. And since there's really only two main pipelines, or three if you count the Iroquois, you have Algonquin going up to Boston from New Jersey. You have Tennessee that comes from actually New York across southern Massachusetts, kind of follows the I-90. And, that's pretty much it. So we did look at other sites and kind of how we got here.
One thing we keep on hearing, you mentioned a lot, is ISO New England.
Yeah.
Please define that a little bit, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the ISO is the Independent System Operator. It's a not-for-profit agency that was set up really by, the various state agencies, and it was set up to, independently control the grid. And so what their main function is to ensure that electricity is reliably delivered. They administer the function of the grid. They determine the dispatch. They dispatch all of the plants. They select the stacking order. They call for the plants. They control the auction, if you will. Who's going to be given a capacity commitment. And then if a plant is already up and operating and they want to retire, then the ISO the independent system operator, says, yes, you can retire, or no, you can't, I need you for reliability. So they are really the governing agency, if you will, for power distribution and power delivery in New England.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. What I just wanted to go back to is sort of in terms of process of where we are. This is obviously the pre-app concept plan. I think hopefully you've gotten a good overview of the project. We are in a little bit of a different situation because the application for this project goes to the Energy Facility Siting Board. And from that, the board has issued a request for a number of advisory opinions, which has been directed in the town to, at minimum, to you and to the zoning board. So this sort of gets into the framework of your traditional planning process, and that's what we're working on a sort of very different and very fast schedule, actually. So tonight, where we are is we're planning now to submit to you our master and preliminary plan application. One of the things I'm going to ask for the board tonight is approval to combine those two stages and go forward at the hearing at that stage. Normally, as you know, for a preliminary plan, we would have our permits in hand. That's one of the definitional steps of going into the preliminary plan phase. And neither the time nor the scope of the project and EFSB approval allows nor contemplates for that. So what we propose, obviously, is we're going to be providing to you, not only John and Mike will be here, but our air, noise, traffic experts, all of that information will be provided to you as you would in a normal planning process, but obviously more because of the nature of the project. We also need a special use permit and variance from the zoning board. So part of our request to you when we do come for the preliminary plan, hopefully again combined with the master, is for positive recommendations to the zoning board hearing, which will be held after the June 6th meeting, which we're proposing right now. So like as I said, this is a little bit of a different animal, but we're going to be following the same process and giving you what we believe will be the same information that we would, even if we had to wait for all the permits. Because those permits will not be issued, obviously any recommendation that you would give would be contingent on getting those approvals. This plan is going nowhere unless we get approval from the Energy Facility Siting Board, and that contemplates getting all of our air, water, federal, state, all of those permits. So those are in the hands of the people that they're always in. But certainly, the EFSB has asked for the town's advisory recommendation. We're putting it into the model of the major land development project, which is what it is. So, with that, this is our presentation. If there's any other questions at this stage, certainly, Mike and John are available. But concludes what we have to present with the request that you allow us to combine the master and preliminary in light of the fact that we also have to go to zoning, and all of this needs to be done by September per the Energy Facility Siting Board.
Yeah, I believe that was contemplated in the schedule that was put out already. That request would be there, and I believe we're prepared to do that. As you say, the permits are not going to be available by that point. However, what we've been asked for was to give you an advisory opinion on the conformance with the comprehensive plan and with the noise ordinance. So we're limited in what we are going to be able to do anyway. So it's not like we're going to approve what you're doing subject to the permits in place, because we're not the approving agency. So it's a little bit different than it would normally be. Tom, anything to add?
I have a few questions I wanted to ask of John, if I could, but just to follow up on that process, you'll still be correct rendering an opinion for the zoning board to use when it undertakes its deliberations about the special use permit, as well as the variance on height of the stacks. But I had a question. It was on, I think it was slide 13, the emissions reduction. Those are regional numbers, the emission reductions? I'm always curious to make that distinction between like regional numbers and Barberville air quality numbers, and I just don't see it enough in the presentation. It's probably a question for a environmental guy, but
These numbers, Tom?
yeah.
Yeah, those are regional numbers. Right.
So to be clear with everybody here in the board, Barberville's kind of taken one for the team, if you will, regionally. That's the way to look at this, really, from an air quality perspective. Regional emissions come down, but Barberville's goes up.
Mike, maybe you could comment on, the air emissions levels that you expect to see as a result of the modeling you've done.
Well, I guess one important point to make is that emissions are transportable. The emissions from any given source don't just stay where the source is. They move across borders, they move across regions. So that's why it's looked at a regional level. There right now are emissions in Burrillville coming from power plants in Connecticut. There are emissions that come from Ocean State Power that go into Massachusetts. So you really can't look at it too locally in terms of the amount of emissions, because emissions move across borders. Now, in terms of the air quality, which is the important correlation to health, the EPA has established national ambient air quality standards, which, based on extensive health studies of the levels at which air quality levels are safe for the public and the environment. And what they require a project like this to do is to predict the maximum air quality concentrations that will come from its emissions and demonstrate that those emissions will be below the national ambient air quality standards. So by making that demonstration on a local level, what we're showing is, although there will be an increase in emissions, the concentrations of contaminants in the air will be below the national ambient air quality standards, which are the levels at which the EPA has determined are safe for the environment.
You haven't answered the question.
And then my other question is likewise about the emissions. The national ambient air quality standards, are those regional numbers too?
They apply everywhere.
Yes or no?
Right, but are they, the national ambient air quality standard are those regional ambient air quality standards in terms of the pollutants?
They apply everywhere.
Yes or no? He's asking a question.
They apply at any location in the country.
So no. Say no.
Keep drilling them, Tom.
No, I'm not trying to drill anybody. I mean, I'm just trying to understand it.
Everything's appropriate
He's
here.
avoiding the answer, Tom.
Except lying.
The one other thing I heard going in when you mentioned lagging the steam ducts in concert with the air cooling, our emissions guy said that that's something we should stay away from, the actual lagging of that, but put it in a building. And I think Doug mentioned it. Is that what you were getting at, Doug? Are they going to put it in a building or not? I just want to make sure that's clear, because the emissions guy said not to lag, and John, you mentioned maybe lagging.
Yeah. Talk about the noise? Yeah, no, you put the valve in the building, right? Having the valve, because the sound is produced from the valve, but also has the potential to go down the pipe and get into the duct. So the lagging that you put on the duct, the valve is in the building, but you put the lagging on to help insulate that duct to so the noise doesn't get transmitted through the duct as well. So you're doing two things there.
Still no answer.
The only other thing I had that I didn't hear was, I know, Beth, I'm glad you explained the request to maybe do a combined plan, because when they come back to you, that means you have to, as a board, provide them with very clear direction as to what you expect on June 6th, because they're going to have to engineer that or vet that out and show it on the plan. Mm-hmm. One of the things I didn't see, and it gets to one of our comp plan findings, natural and cultural resources policy 2.1.a, developing the site sympathetically to site topography, water courses, and water bodies. And I know, John, that you mentioned there'd definitely be probably one crossing, but if we could utilize the existing driveway at Algonquin, it would very much appear to be less of an impact. Is that something that the board considered? And Chairman, would you, if so, vet that out clearly with the members so that they know if that's something the board wants, they would have to explore that coming back.
Yeah, I believe we'd discussed that at one point, and the way that the driveway is laid out with the water crossings, we prefer to have it, we prefer to use anything that is less disturbance, if you will. So was there some reason why you wouldn't use the existing driveway or road?
The Algonquin driveway?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a couple of reasons. One, we approached Algonquin with that request, and, they reviewed it. They didn't like the idea of, all the traffic coming down in there and potentially disrupting, their operations.
Neither do we.
The second thing was that it was pointed out that the state fire marshal would actually probably rather have two entrances, so that if there was ever an event, that you had a way to get in other than just having one road.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Sure.
We've still got quite a few questions that have been submitted to Invenergy. Are we going to receive those responses prior to the June 6th meeting, or are they going to all come to us in a package then?
We expect them before June 6th. By law, or by regulation, there's a time frame of 15 days from submission of the data requests to get those answers. But we've just, as recently as I believe just Friday, sent out the 8th set. So presumably we'll have, if we don't have any more requests, we should have them by middle of May. So we should have them in plenty of time to deliver them to our consultants for review and give us a report prior to June 6th. Unless, of course, there's more questions that we have to ask.
Beth, in a conversation that you and I had prior, there was some discussion about the consultants getting together with the company. Is that something that you were contemplating? Or?
What I was thinking of in terms of the information that we've presented and that your consultants have reviewed, there is to some degree a baseline amount of agreement either on methodologies or approaches.
Sure.
And in addition to having the data request, what my thought had been in order to give you, the planning board, as concise of information as possible is if there was an opportunity for sort of each consultant, mano a mano, if you will, for them to speak with one another, via the data request or even after that, such that they can talk amongst themselves. I think it's common, it's done a lot with traffic.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had that before you, I'll present a traffic study to a town, they'll hire someone to do a peer review, they'll go back and forth without interference from someone like me or Tom or,
sure.
or somebody, and then they'll say, listen, we've resolved all the issues, but we have 2 outstanding items. That gets presented to you as a board and,
yep.
and to me as the applicant's attorney saying, how can we resolve that? That was my thought, was on this issue, can we narrow down our areas, if you will, of disagreement or concern and make that a more productive meeting on the 6th rather than us present, your town consultants present and then go through that. So if it could help, I think it might expedite, or an understanding of where our real concerns and issues lie between our experts who are really going to drive that discussion.
Sure, and a lot of these issues are entangling. There's a number of loose ends, if you will, and if a lot of those can be taken care of before the meeting, that would probably be helpful,
right.
or time efficient, if you will.
Correct.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Will the construction plans be part of they won't?
Construction plans probably will not. There may be some more detailed layout plans, but remember, we're still early in the process, so from a planning perspective, you'll certainly have a footprint, and then in terms of things in air emissions or water, how those things are handled, you'll see that information, but not detailed construction documents at this point.
Okay. I'm guessing Mr. Presby would like to see a lot of the drainage and all that other stuff, so I assume none of those are going to be available either.
As far as the drainage report, I'd like to see that As far as the drainage report, I'd like to see that reviewed by an independent body that has a little bit more time to be able to review this stuff than I would on a part-time basis.
Well, I think your engineering consultants will review what our people prepare, and ultimately, of course, RIDEM will be reviewing that under the regulations that were adopted last year.
Yeah, okay, as long as we have some, independent body reviewing the drainage information calculations and stuff like that. But, I would like to see, you submitted a set of plans to us that were really quite vague, and I hope we do receive something more substantial than that for the next
Absolutely. Understand this is the concept plan stage. What I really wanted to get, aside from having John do his presentation, we've got this large piece of property. The proposal, really from getting to a land use perspective, is that Invenergy will be acquiring, a certain amount of acreage that you see detailed. Some of the lots will be configured. There'll be an administrative plan to reformulate some of these lots. We're creating 450 feet of frontage on the road, which complies with your regulations. We'll have an existing, path and crossing coming into the site, and that's what we're going to be looking for the approval for. So, as I said, it's taking the larger parcel, creating this new lot, which we've had our land surveyors look at and prepare that, and get the approval to do the administrative subdivision also, if everything is approved. So that's, from a land perspective, that's what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I understand the part about the land perspective and the layout of the plan. I have no problem with that. It's adequate what we have. However, there's details that are missing on the plan, where this is going to be, what's that going to be. The other things that I feel uncomfortable with is the safety issues, the hazmat issues, the handling of various materials. Being that this is not a normal subdivision that we deal with, it's a manufacturing facility. And I think that's part of my concern, or actually the biggest part of my concern, is a health and safety issue. And this board is formed to preserve and maintain the health and safety for the town. So if it's going to be done, our job is to make sure as best we can that it's done right. And when we do the clarification and this stuff, that's a lot of our driving force behind this. I plan on living here another 30, 40 years, God willing. And I don't want to see this become a ground site, but worse than a ground site. So a lot of what we're asking is that we need to know.
I don't disagree at all with your statements, and we have that information. That's what our experts will be producing, and that's certainly within, what you have the right to look at.
Thank you.
Ammonia.
Yes, I have a question. Are there any plans to take any homes, any abutters or anything like that by eminent domain by the state or anything like that? Or if any neighbors wanted to move away to get compensated for their homes?
As to the first question, no, this is not a state project where eminent domain would come into play whatsoever. I believe there are some discussions about property. I don't know all of those myself in terms of surrounding neighbors, but no eminent domain whatsoever.
I may shed some light. There are negotiations with the town, at least the officials from the town, such as myself, the other attorney, and Invenergy's representatives, to see what we can do to mitigate the diminution in value of the neighboring homes. Yes, we're in the process of negotiating something.
Okay, Tom, closing thoughts?
I want to let this driveway thing go, but I just want to be clear. Would the planning board support or having the fire marshal have an emergency access that's, say, a slight upgrade of the gravel road, but left gravel and only used for the second means of ingress, and still use the Algonquin driveway?
Yeah, obviously there's...
I want you to be clear with John. I want to know what he should design coming back for June.
If we can use the existing piece, if they can, improve it, if they can, widen it to make it to the point where it makes sense for everybody involved, then yes, I think that would be the most preferable way to go. If you want the second egress that is, not the primary one, that would certainly work out better.
Because you've created lots through easement before, actually recently.
Right.
And so the 450 feet of frontage is just not, it's not an issue really for access.
Correct.
All right, I wanted John to hear that because that's something that the board has done. Granted access through easements.
Yeah, and you're doing a stream crossing on there, you're doing, a couple of wetlands crossings, so your permit process is going to be more lengthy because of that also. So if there's any way that you can take what's existing now, widen it or improve it to reach the capacity that you need, and then have a second egress that is an emergency or a temporary one, that might be the more preferable route. Yes. We were talking about a second entrance for, you mean what they had? Okay. So.
Thank you. As far as two entryways coming into the facility area, are we looking at a finished product or just in access, or are we looking at a construction entry into the site?
Do you mean, using Algonquin Lane as the permanent?
Yes, versus using a separate entryway for construction purposes only. I mean, obviously, when and if this is approved and it gets into operation, you're talking about a minor amount of trips on the roadway that exists as compared to a major amount of trips during the construction stage. So is Algonquin concerned about the construction stage, or?
It's more my concern, Bruce, and I'm not going to jump in, John, but they were going to utilize the new roadway to construct the facility and enter and leave it daily. I'm saying, would they consider using the existing Algonquin driveway to enter the facility to construct it and use it afterwards? Yeah. That's coming from me.
Well, that gets back to the bump strip idea, too. I'd rather see the dirt left on the Algonquin strip myself.
I think my whole point was in trying to meet the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plan is to limit impacts to wetlands. So leave the car path the way it is to the greatest extent you can. That's where I'm coming from on it.
Yeah, well, I think Bruce also, if I can interpret, tell me if I get this wrong, but I think the other thing he was saying was, is Algonquin objecting to the amount of things that are going to happen during construction, therefore you need to construct another road not to disrupt them, versus after everything's all set, just using the Algonquin road.
Yeah, I think they were objecting to both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about us?
Okay.
I guess the last thing is the next meeting will be public hearing.
Yep.
We have to notify butters within 200 feet. We're going to do that from the Algonquin property as it is configured today. We wouldn't do it based on a prospective subdivision. So we'll play that by ear depending on how many people show up. We'll, get through the hearings, and then I think it's a good thing to have the consultants interplay there with each other, so our consultants that we've hired can properly advise you guys to save time, because to mix it with, we still got to get the bottom lines, we got to get this opinion where it needs to go in time, or else, what are we doing? We got to give the EFSB some direction.
Yes.
We gave the zoning board direction before that, so that's really what's driving this, is we got to get a zoning board meeting in before September 9th, so we can advise the zoning board properly. So that's it. Yeah, next thing, we're scheduling the hearing for June 6th here at 7 p.m.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Oh, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that.
I have a motion on the floor to combine the preliminary and master plans for the June 6th meeting. I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Nay.
Any opposed? Two opposed. Three opposed. 1, 2.
You know, we can't hear you at all, sorry.
I'm counting the votes, and we'll announce them once I've counted them. So, gentlemen, we have a motion and a second on the floor. We have, I would like a hand vote if I may. So, all those in favor? 1, 2. 2. All those opposed? 1, 2, 4. Motion fails 2 to 4. Well, then we have an extra meeting right now. So, sorry, folks, that's who we are. So, go ahead, Doug.
What that means is the applicant's coming back with master plan application. That's not a public hearing. There will be no notice sent for June 6th.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Thank you very much for your time.
thank you. So, June 6th will not be a public hearing. So June 6th will be the master plan, preliminary plan, master plan. Yep. Okay. And that will not be a public hearing. And then the July meeting now will potentially be the public hearing.
Yeah, or another meeting in late June, depending on how quickly
Right, okay.
We can try to. There's an informational meeting notice that's required by state law and the Planning Enabling Act to be sent out for master plans.
Yep.
So butters within 200 feet will receive the informational meeting notice.
Right.
The public hearing again will come later. A meeting that's yet to be determined. We'll probably determine that at the master plan, perhaps. That'll be the hearing, just so people know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Had the combined application approval process passed, would have been the hearing, starting the hearing on June 6th. But,
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So just entertain a motion to adjourn, unless anybody has anything else. I have a motion. Second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much.